In the quiet village of Elara, nestled in a small valley surrounded by fields, there was a food vendor named Ladi. She was known for her beauty and her charming smile, but even more for her cooking. Her food was delicious, unlike anything the villagers had ever tasted. Every day, she set up her stall near the busy marketplace, and by midday, there was always a long line of people waiting to buy her meals. Ladi's reputation grew quickly. Word spread that her food had a unique flavor, something that kept people coming back for more. The men of the village, especially the married ones, couldn't resist her cooking. They began visiting her stall daily, abandoning the meals their wives had prepared at home. Ladi's stall became a gathering place, and soon it was as though she had become a central figure in the village. The village women noticed the change. They saw their husbands returning home late, their bellies full of Ladi's food, with barely a word of thanks for the meals left untouched on the table. It wasn't long before whispers began to circulate among the wives. What was it that made Ladi's food so special? Why were the men so captivated by it? The mystery hung over the village like a dark cloud, and the women began to grow suspicious. As the days passed, the situation in Elara worsened. The married men of the village were no longer interested in the meals their wives prepared. They spent more time at Ladi's food stall, praising her cooking and neglecting their homes. The women felt increasingly sidelined, their efforts unappreciated, and their relationships strained. The once peaceful village was now filled with silent tension. Many wives began to notice a pattern. Their husbands were no longer complimenting them or spending time with their families. The men would rush out in the mornings and return late in the afternoons, always full from Ladi's meals. The wives tried everything to win back their husbands' attention, cooking their best dishes and offering kindness, but it seemed nothing could compare to Ladi's food. The women of Elara began to feel helpless and frustrated. It wasn't just the women who noticed the shift. The elders of the village also saw how things were changing. Families that had once been close were now distant. Conversations that used to take place at home over meals were now happening at Ladi's food stall. It seemed as though Ladi's cooking was driving a wedge between the people of Elara, and the elders feared what might happen if the situation continued. The wives of Elara had had enough. One evening, after their husbands had returned late from Ladi's stall yet again, a group of them gathered under the old tree at the center of the village. They spoke in low voices, sharing their frustrations and their fears. Something wasn't right, they all agreed. Ladi's cooking was not just delicious, it seemed to have a strange power over the men. "We must find out what she is doing," said Amina, the wife of one of the most respected men in the village. She had always been quiet, but now her voice was firm. "This can't continue. We need to know what is in that food of hers." The women agreed. They decided to work together, putting aside their differences to uncover the truth. They knew they had to approach the situation carefully. Ladi had become popular in the village, and accusing her of anything without proof would be dangerous. But they couldn't sit back and do nothing. If their husbands wouldn't come back to them, they would have to go to Ladi themselves. That night, the women made a plan. They would take turns visiting Ladi's stall, pretending to be curious about her cooking. They would watch her closely, looking for any signs of what made her food so irresistible. Together, they hoped they could uncover the secret that was tearing their families apart. Over the next few days, the wives of Elara began their investigation. One by one, they visited Ladi's stall, pretending to admire her cooking skills. Ladi welcomed them with her usual charm, offering them small samples of her food. The women smiled politely, but they were watching closely, their eyes scanning every move Ladi made. They noticed the way she handled the ingredients, the care she took in preparing each dish, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. However, as the days went on, some of the women began to notice something strange. Ladi always cooked alone, refusing any offers of help. She kept her ingredients hidden away, never allowing anyone to see what she was using. And most peculiar of all, she never ate her own food. This struck the women as odd. Why would a cook who made such delicious meals refuse to taste them? One day, when Ladi stepped away from her stall for a moment, one of the women, Mariam, saw her chance. She quickly peeked behind the counter, hoping to get a glimpse of Ladi's secret ingredients. What she saw shocked her. Hidden in a small jar at the back of the stall was something that didn't belong in any meal, something dark and sinister. Mariam quickly stepped back, her heart racing. She knew they had found something, but she didn't know exactly what it was. It was time to call on someone with more knowledge. Mariam hurried back to the group of wives that evening, her face pale and her hands trembling. She told them what she had seen, describing the strange jar hidden in Ladi's stall. The other women listened in disbelief. They had suspected something was wrong, but they hadn't expected this. The question now was, what exactly was Ladi using in her food? One of the women, Dahlia, suggested they seek the help of someone who could give them answers. Her father, Baba Tunde, was a well-known spiritualist in the village. He had helped many people before, offering wisdom and guidance in times of need. If anyone could uncover the truth, it was him. The women agreed, and the next morning, they went to see Baba Tunde. When they arrived at his small hut on the edge of the village, Baba Tunde welcomed them inside. He listened carefully as they explained the situation, nodding thoughtfully as they spoke. After they had finished, he sat in silence for a moment before speaking. "There is something dark at play here," he said slowly. "Ladies' cooking is not just food. There is a spiritual force behind it, and it is affecting the minds of the men in this village." The women gasped. They had feared as much, but hearing it confirmed sent chills down their spines. Baba Tunde stood up and began preparing for a ritual. He needed to see for himself what kind of magic Ladi was using. The women waited anxiously, hoping that Baba Tunde would be able to give them the answers they sought. Baba Tunde performed his ritual that night, calling on the spirits to reveal the truth behind Ladi's cooking. As the flames from his fire flickered, the women watched in silence. After several minutes, Baba Tunde's eyes widened, and he gasped. "I see it now," he said. "Ladi is using something unholy in her food. She is mixing her own menstrual flow into the meals she prepares. It is a dark and dangerous form of magic." The women were horrified. They could hardly believe what they were hearing. Ladi, the beautiful and charming cook, was using such a vile and forbidden ingredient in her food. It explained everything, the strange power her meals seemed to have over the men, the way their husbands had been acting. This was no ordinary cooking. It was a form of witchcraft, and it had to be stopped. Baba Tunde warned the women that confronting Ladi would not be easy. She had been using this dark magic for some time, and it had likely given her some protection. But the women were determined. They could not allow this to continue. With Baba Tunde's guidance, they made a plan to confront Ladi and expose her secret to the entire village. The next day, the women of Elara marched to Ladi's stall. Their hearts were pounding, but they knew they had to be brave. It was time for Ladi to answer for her actions. The wives of Elara gathered their courage and approached Ladi's food stall early the next morning. Their faces were stern, and their hearts beat fast with a mix of fear and anger. Ladi, unaware of what was coming, greeted them with her usual warm smile, expecting compliments for her food. But today was different. The women stood together, united in their cause, and their leader, Amina, stepped forward to speak. "Ladi," Amina began, her voice steady, "we know what you've been doing. You've been using something evil in your food, something no one should ever consume. It's time to tell the truth." The other women nodded in agreement, their eyes fixed on Ladi, waiting for her response. Ladi's smile faded, and a look of shock crossed her face. She stammered, trying to deny the accusation, but the women pressed on. "We know about the jar," Mariam added. "We saw it, and we've spoken to Baba Tunde. He knows what you've been using." At the mention of the spiritualist's name, Ladi's face turned pale. She knew her secret was out. Hey lovelies, sorry for interrupting. Please, if you are getting value from this video, kindly subscribe to our channel, comment, like, and share. Turn on the notification bell so that you will be notified when we drop more awesome videos like this. Thank you. Let's continue with our story. For a moment, there was silence. Then Ladi dropped her head, her voice barely a whisper. "It's true," she confessed. "I've been using my own blood, mixing it into the food. I didn't mean to cause harm. I was just desperate to make my food special, to be noticed." Her confession stunned the women, but their resolve didn't waver. Ladi's actions had hurt too many families, and she had to face the consequences. News of Ladi's dark secret spread through the village of Elara like wildfire. By noon, almost everyone had heard the shocking revelation, and the villagers began to gather in the village square. They were angry, confused, and disgusted. How could someone who had been so well-liked, someone they had trusted, do something so terrible? The men who had once adored Ladi's food were especially horrified, realizing they had unknowingly consumed something so forbidden. The village elders, who were the leaders and decision-makers, were called to handle the situation. The elders were wise and respected, and it was up to them to decide what would happen to Ladi. They listened carefully as the women explained what Baba Tunde had revealed. They also heard Ladi's confession, but there was no pity in their hearts for her. The elders knew that what she had done was not just wrong, it was a betrayal of the village's trust. After a long discussion, the chief elder stood and addressed the crowd. Ladi has used dark magic to deceive us, he said. She has disrupted the peace in our village and harmed many families. For this, she must be banished from Elara. We cannot allow such evil to remain among us. The villagers cheered in agreement, their anger turning to action. Ladi would no longer be a part of their community. She had brought this fate upon herself. The next day, Ladi stood at the edge of the village, her belongings packed in a small sack. She was no longer the beautiful and confident food vendor that the villagers had once admired. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from tears, and her hands shook as she held onto her bag. The villagers gathered to watch her leave, their faces cold and unforgiving. Even those who had once been her loyal customers had turned against her. There was no sympathy for Ladi, only judgment. As she walked away from the village, Ladi's heart was heavy with shame and regret. She had never imagined that her desire to be special would lead to this. She had wanted to be admired and loved for her cooking, but now she was hated and rejected. With each step she took, the reality of her situation sank deeper. She had lost everything: her business, her friends, and the village that had been her home. The villagers watched until Ladi disappeared from sight. Then they turned and went back to their homes, relieved that the danger was gone. But the memory of what had happened would not fade quickly. The women, in particular, felt a mix of emotions. They were glad that the truth had come out, but they couldn't forget the pain Ladi had caused. Their families had been shaken, and it would take time to heal the wounds she had left behind. In the days that followed Ladi's banishment, the village of Elara slowly began to return to normal. The men, now aware of the dark magic that had influenced them, felt a deep sense of guilt. They realized how much they had hurt their wives by choosing Ladi's food over the meals prepared at home. Many of them apologized to their families, seeking forgiveness for their actions. It wasn't easy, but the village was built on strong values of unity and love, and the process of healing began. The wives, who had suffered in silence for so long, now felt a sense of relief. They no longer had to compete with Ladi for their husband's attention. Their homes were peaceful again, and their relationships began to heal. Though the memory of Ladi's betrayal was still fresh, the women of Elara were determined to move forward. They supported one another, sharing stories and laughter as they cooked meals together in the evenings. The bond between the wives grew stronger, and the village began to feel like a community once more. Baba Tunde, the wise spiritualist, continued to offer guidance to the villagers. He reminded them of the importance of honesty and trust in their relationships. Evil deeds may be hidden for a time, he said, but the truth always comes to light. We must be careful not to let greed or jealousy lead us down dark paths. The villagers listened to his words and vowed to never let something like this happen again. As time passed, the story of Ladi and her dark secret became a lesson for the entire village of Elara. Parents told the story to their children, warning them about the dangers of deceit and greed. It became a cautionary tale, reminding everyone that actions have consequences and that even the smallest wrong choice can lead to disaster. The men, in particular, learned to appreciate their wives more. They realized that the meals prepared with love at home were far more valuable than anything they could buy from a vendor. They promised to never again let themselves be swayed by outside influences and to always support their families. The women, too, learned the importance of standing up for themselves and seeking the truth when something felt wrong. The village elders used the story as a reminder of the importance of unity. They emphasized that the strength of Elara came from the bonds between its people, and that those bonds had to be protected at all costs. The village had come close to being torn apart by Ladi's actions, but in the end, the unity of the people had saved them. With Ladi gone and her dark magic no longer affecting the village, Elara returned to the peaceful, happy place it had always been. The marketplace buzzed with life once again, but now, the food vendors who sold their meals did so with honesty and respect for their customers. No one sought to gain an unfair advantage or use tricks to attract more business. The village had learned its lesson, and the people valued their community more than ever before. Families grew closer, spending more time together and appreciating the small things in life. The village women often gathered in the evenings to cook together, sharing recipes and laughter as they prepared meals for their families. The men, too, contributed more at home, helping with chores and spending time with their children. There was a sense of harmony in the air, and the village felt more united than ever before. The memory of Ladi's betrayal still lingered, but it no longer brought pain. Instead, it served as a reminder of how far the village had come. The people of Elara had faced a great challenge, but they had overcome it by working together and standing up for what was right. The village of Elara began to thrive once more, but now with a deeper sense of gratitude and awareness. As the rainy season gave way to a fruitful harvest, the villagers held a grand celebration. The marketplace was decorated with vibrant fabrics and colorful flowers, symbolizing renewal and unity. People laughed and danced, thankful for the peace that had returned to their lives. During the celebration, the women of the village introduced new meals, proudly showcasing their culinary skills. The men who had once been drawn to Ladi's food now praised their wives cooking more than ever. The joy in the air was palpable, and the bond between husbands and wives had never been stronger. Everyone appreciated the effort that went into preparing each meal, and families gathered around their tables with a renewed sense of togetherness. Amina, the leader of the wives who had confronted Ladi, stood with pride as she watched the celebration unfold. "We have come a long way," she said to Mariam, who stood beside her. "This village is stronger than ever, and we must continue to protect it." Mariam nodded in agreement. The women had learned the importance of unity, and they knew that by standing together, they could overcome any challenge that came their way. One evening, after the festival had ended, Baba Tunde invited the villagers to gather around his fire. His face, illuminated by the flickering flames, was calm and wise. The people of Elara respected him deeply, for it was his guidance that had helped uncover Ladi's dark secret and restore peace to the village. Tonight, they had come to listen to his words of wisdom once more. Baba Tunde spoke slowly, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "The events of the past months have taught us many lessons," he began. "We have learned that greed can lead to destruction, and that deception, no matter how small, can grow into something dangerous. But we have also learned the power of truth, unity, and love." He paused, looking around at the villagers who sat before him. "Each of you has a role to play in protecting our community. When we work together, we are strong. When we trust one another and stand up for what is right, no evil can harm us. Remember this, always." The villagers nodded, taking his words to heart. Baba Tunde's wisdom had become an anchor for the village, guiding them through difficult times and helping them find their way back to harmony. As the fire crackled and the stars twinkled overhead, the people of Elara felt a deep sense of peace. They knew that as long as they remained united, they could face any challenge that the future might bring. Years passed, and the tale of Ladi and her dark magic became part of Elara's history. Parents told the story to their children, not as a mere cautionary tale, but as a reminder of the importance of honesty, unity, and trust. The younger generation grew up hearing about the brave women who had stood together to uncover the truth and the wise spiritualist who had guided them through the storm. The story became a part of the village's legacy. Each year, during the harvest festival, the people of Elara would gather to tell the story once more. It was not told with bitterness or anger, but with a sense of pride in the strength and unity that had brought the village through such a dark time. Ladi, though banished, was never forgotten. Her actions served as a lesson to all that evil, no matter how cleverly disguised, would always be revealed in the end. The village elders would remind the people that while forgiveness was important, so was justice. The banishment of Ladi was a reminder that actions have consequences, and that the well-being of the community must always come first. As the village thrived and grew, the story of Ladi's downfall became a symbol of hope. It showed that no matter how difficult the challenges, the people of Elara could overcome anything by standing together, trusting in one another, and always seeking the truth. The village had become stronger, wiser, and more united, and they would carry those lessons with them for generations to come. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this story and want to hear more gripping folk tales that inspire, teach, and entertain, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Join us on this journey. Don't miss out on the next exciting video. Subscribe now and be part of our growing community.